and this is my wife Brittany, and today we are reading from June 12th.
Yes,
Okay.
June 12th. We're going to be starting with 2 Kings chapters 11 verses 1 to chapter 13 verse 25. When Athaliah, the mother of Hazael, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal offspring. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Hazael, took Jasa, son of Uzziah, and stole him from among the king's sons who were being put to death, and placed him and his nurse in the bedroom. So they hid him from Athaliah, and he was not to be put to death. So he was hidden with her in the house of the Lord 6 years, while Athaliah was reigning over the land. Now in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and brought captains of hundreds of chariots and guards, and brought them to him in the house of the Lord. Then he made a covenant with them, and put them under oath in the house of the Lord, and showed them the king's son. He commanded them, saying, "This is the thing that you shall do. 1/3 of you who come in on the Sabbath and keep watch over the king's house. 1/3 also shall be at the gate, and 1/3 at the gate behind the guards shall keep watch over the house of the defense. 2 parts of you, even all who go out on the Sabbath, shall also keep watch over the house of the Lord for the king. Then you shall surround the king, each with his weapons in his hand, and whoever comes within the ranks shall be put to death, and he be with the king when he goes out and when he comes in." So the captains of hundreds did according to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded. And each one of them took his men who were to come in on the Sabbath with those who were to go out on the Sabbath, and gave Jehoiada the priest. The priest gave the captains of hundreds spears and shields, that had been King David's, which were in the house of the Lord. The guards stood each with his weapons in his hand, from the right side of the house to the left, on the house, by the altar, by the house, around the king. Then he brought the king's son out, and put the crown on him, and gave him the testimony. And they made him king, and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, "Long live the king." When Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she came to the people of the house of the Lord. She looked, and behold, the king was standing by the pillar, according to custom, with the captains and the trumpeters beside the king. And all the people of the land rejoiced and blew trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, "Treason, treason!" Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of hundreds who were appointed over the army, and said to them, "Bring her out between the ranks, and whoever follows her be put to death with the sword." For the priest said, "Let her not be put to death in the house of the Lord." So they seized her, and when she arrived at the horse's entrance of the house of the king's house, she was put to death there. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they would be the Lord's people. Also between the king and the people. All the people of the land went to the house of Baal, and tore it down. His altars, his images, they broke into pieces thoroughly, and killed Mountain, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priests appointed officers over the house of the Lord. Now our first note for today is from chapter 11, verse 17, a covenant. The renewal of the agreement between the people and the Lord, and between the house of David and the people, was appropriate. Because of the disruption under Athaliah, a similar ceremony was held later during the reign of Josiah, as stated in chapter 23, verses 1 through 3. Now we're going to be back in verse 19. He took the captains of hundreds and chariots and the guards and all the people of the land, and they brought the king down from the house of the Lord, and came by the way of the gate of the guards in the king's house, and he sat on the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, for they had put Athaliah to death with the sword at the king's house. Jehoshaphat was 7 years old when he became king. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoshaphat became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. Jehoshaphat did right in the sight of the Lord in all his days, which Jehoiada the priest instructed him. Only the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense in the high places. Then Jehoshaphat said to the priests, "All money and the sacred things which is brought into the house of the Lord, and current money, both the money of each man's assessment and all the money which any man's heart prompts him to bring into the house of the Lord, let him bring into the house of the Lord. Let the priests take it for themselves, each from his acquaintance, and they shall repair the damage of the house, whatever any damage may be found. But it came about in the 23rd year of the king Jehoash, the priests had not repaired the damages of the house. Then King Jehoash called the Jehoiada, the priest, and said for the other priests, and said to them, why do you not repair the damages of the house? Now therefore take no more money from your acquaintances, but pay it for the damages of the house. So the priests agreed that they would take no more money from the people, nor repair the damages of the house. But Jehoiada the priest took a chest and a board and a hole in its lid, and put it beside the altar, on the right side as one comes into the house of the Lord. And the priests who guard the threshold put it on the money which was brought into the house of the Lord. When they saw there was much money in the chest, the king's scribe and high priest came and tied it in bags and counted the money which was found in the house of the Lord. They gave the money which was weighed out into the hands of those who did the work, who had the oversight of the house of the Lord. And they paid it out to the carpenters and the builders who worked in the house of the Lord, and to the masons and the stone cutters, and for buying timber and hewn stone to repair the damages of the house of the Lord, and for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. But there were not made for the house of the Lord silver cups, snuffers, bowls, trumpets, any vessels of gold or vessels of silver from the money which is brought into the house of the Lord. For they gave that to those who did the work, and with it they repaired the house of the Lord. Moreover, they did not require an accounting from the men to whose hand gave the money to pay for those who did the work, for they dealt faithfully. The money from the guilt offerings and the money from the sin offerings was not brought into the house of the Lord. It was for the priests. Then Hazael king of Aram went up and fought against Gath and captured it. Hazael set his face up to go to Jerusalem. Jehoash king of Judah took all the sacred things that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Hazael his fathers king of Judah had dedicated, and his own sacred things, and all the gold that was found among the treasuries of the house of the Lord, and in the king's house, and sent them to Hazael king of Aram. Then he went away from Jerusalem. Now the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did are not written in the book of Chronicles of the king of Judah. His servants arose and made conspiracy and struck down Jehoash in the house of Milo as he was going down to Selah. For Josachar the son of Shimeath and Jehozabad son of Shomer his servant struck him, and he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David. And Amizah his son became king in his place. Now we're in chapter 13. In the 23rd year of Joash the son of Ahaziah king of Judah, Jehoshaphat son of Jehu became king over Israel at Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, with which he made Israel sin. He did not turn from them, so his anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. He gave them continually into the hand of Hazael king of Aram, and into the hand of Benhadad son of Hazael. Then Jehoshaphat entreated this favor of the Lord, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, and how the king of Aram oppressed them. The Lord gave Israel a deliverer, so that they escaped from under the hand of the Arameans, and the sons of Israel lived in their tents formerly. Nevertheless, they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, which he made Israel sin, but walked in them. And Asherah, who remained standing in Samaria, for he left Jehovah's in the army not more than 50 horsemen and 10 chariots and 10,000 footmen, for the king of Aram had destroyed them and made them like the dust at a threshing. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat and all that did in his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Israel? And Jehoshaphat slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And Joash his son became king in his place. In the 37th year, Joash king of Judah and Jehoash son of Jehoshaphat became king over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 16 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, He did not turn away from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, with which he made Israel sin, but walked in them. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoash, and all the things that he did, and his might, which he fought against Amaziah king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat on his throne, and Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. When Elisha became sick with the illness of which he was to die, Joash king of Israel came down to him and wept over him and said, my father, the chariots of Israel and his horsemen. Elisha said to him, take a bow and arrows, and he took a bow and arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, put your hand on the bow. And he put his hand on it. And Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands. And he said, open the window toward the east. He opened it. And then Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the Lord's arrow of victory, even the arrow of victory over Aram. For you will defeat the Arameans at Aphek until you destroy them. Then he said, take arrows. And he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground. And he struck it 3 times and stopped. So the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times, and you would have struck Aram until you would have destroyed it. But now you shall strike Aram only 3 times. Elisha died, and they buried him. And now the bands of the Moabites would invade the land in the spring of the year. And they are burying man. Behold, they saw marauding, and they cast the man into the grave of Elisha. And when the man touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood on his feet. Now Hazael king of Aram oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoshaphat, but the Lord was gracious to them and had compassion for them and turned to them because of his covenant with Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not destroy them and cast them from his presence until now. Now we have a note from verse 21, he revived. A dead man returned to life after touching Elisha's bones. This miracle was a sign of God's power, continued to work in the relationship with Elisha even after his death. What God had promised to Jehoshaphat through Elisha when he was alive would surely come to pass after the prophet's death. This was stated in verses 19 and 25. And the defeat of the enemy, the recovery of the cities that had been taken, their restoration to the kingdom of Israel. This is stated in verses 22 through 25. And now we're coming back just for the last little bit of this in verse 24. When Hazael, king of Aram, died, Ben-Hadad his son came in his place. Then Jehoshaphat, the son of Jehoahaz, took again from the land of Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, the cities in which he had taken war from the hand of Jehoahaz his father. 3 times Jehoshaphat defeated him and recovered the cities of Israel. Now we're going to be hopping into Psalm 73 verses 1 through 9, a psalm of Asaph. Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet came close to stumbling. My steps had almost slipped, for I was envious of the arrogant, as I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no pains in their death, and their body is fat. They are not in trouble as other men, nor are they plagued like mankind. Therefore pride is their necklace, the garment of violence covers them. Their eye bulges from fatness. The imaginations of their heart run riot. They mock and wickedly speak of oppression. They speak from high. They have set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue parades through the earth. And now we're going to be doing Proverbs chapter 18, verses 16 through 17. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. The first to plead his case seems right until another comes and examines him. And now we have a note from Proverbs chapter 16, man's gift. This is not the word for a bribe, but rather for the word for a present given to someone. See Jacob's gift in Genesis 32, verse 20 through 21, and Joseph's gift in Genesis 43, verse 11, as well as David's gift in First Solomon 17, 17 through 18, and Abigail's gift in First Solomon 25, verse 27. Now we're going to be finishing up in John chapter 19, verses 23 through 42. Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part for every soldier, and also a tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven into one piece. So they said to one another, let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to decide whose it shall be. This was to fulfill the scripture, quote, they divided my outer garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots, end quote. Therefore the soldiers did these things. Now we have our first note for John, which is in verse 23. His outer garments and also the tunic. By custom, the clothes of the condemned person were the property of the executioners. The division of the garments suggests that the execution squad was made up of 4 soldiers, as stated in Acts 12:4. The tunic was worn next to the skin. The plural of garments probably refers to the clothes, including an outer garment, belt, sandals, and head covering. And we have another note for verse 24. John cites Psalms 22:18. In the psalm, David, beset by physical distress and mockery by his opponents, uses symbolism by the common practice in an execution scene in which the executioner divides the victim's clothes to portray the depth of his trouble. It is notable that David precisely described a form of execution that he had never seen. The passage was typologically prophetic of David's heir to the messianic throne. This is stated in Matthew 27, verse 46, as well as Mark chapter 15, verse 34. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus then saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to his disciple, Behold your mother. From that hour the disciple took her into his own household. After this, Jesus, knowing all the things that had already been accomplished to fulfill the scripture, said, I am thirsty. A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of sour wine upon a branch of hyssop and brought it to his mouth. Therefore, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, It is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Then the Jews, because it was the day of preparation, so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath was a high day, asked Pilate that their legs may be broken and that they may be taken away. So soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other who were crucified with him. But coming to Jesus, when they saw he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately the blood and water came out. And he who was seen as testified, and his testimony is true, and he knows that he is telling the truth, so that you also may believe. For these things came to pass to fulfill scripture, quote, not a bone of him shall be broken, end quote. And again in another scripture saying, quote, they shall look on him who they pierced, end quote. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he may take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate granted permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus, who had first come to him by night, also came bringing a mixture of myrrh along with aloes, about 100 pounds weight. So they took the body of Jesus, and bound it in linen wrappings, and with the spices, as its burial custom with the Jews. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and the garden a new tomb, which no one had yet been laid. Therefore, because of the Jewish day of preparation, since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Now we're just finishing up with our day 12 note. Was there any question as to whether Jesus died or not? In his death on the cross, Jesus finally cried out, "It is finished," in John 19:30. The verb here carries the idea of fulfilling one's task, and in religious context has the idea of fulfilling one's religious obligations. The entire work of redemption had been brought to completion. The single Greek word here, translated "it is finished," has been found in the pipery being placed on receipts for taxes, meaning paid in full, in Colossians chapter 3, verse 13 through 14. He gave up his spirit. The sentence signaled that Jesus handed over his spirit as an act of his will. No one took his life from him, for he voluntarily and willingly gave it up. In chapter 10, verses 17 through 18. It was the day of preparation in verse 31. This refers to Friday, the Sabbath, the day before the preparation for the Sabbath. Bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath. The normal Roman practice was to leave crucified men and women on the cross until they died, and this could take days, and leave their rotting bodies hanging there to be devoured by vultures. The Mosaic law insisted that anyone being impaled, usually after execution, should not remain there overnight, as stated in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 22 through 23. Such a person was under God's curse, and to leave him exposed would be to desecrate the land in their minds. So the Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken in order to hasten the death for certain reasons. Soldiers would smash the legs of the victim with an iron mallet. Not only did this action induce shock and additional loss of blood, but it prevented the victim from pushing with his legs to keep breathing. Thus, the victim died due to asphyxiation. However, the soldier stabbing of Jesus' side caused significant penetration because of the sudden flow of blood and water in verse 34. Either the spear pierced Jesus' heart or the chest cavity was pierced at the bottom. In either event, John mentioned the outflow of blood and water to emphasize that Jesus was unquestionably dead. And that is all of our reading for today, so we'll be able to pick it up tomorrow, June 13th.
Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Have a nice day.